Yeah, all right. So what I'm going to attempt to do is to look at Testenium at a high level, right? What's the reason for our being in some sense? What's the platform aiming to do? And I think that's really important. Yes,
Yeah.
we are a startup, but by the same and where we are today, that's one side of the business, but essentially what we're trying to achieve and enable is probably more critical here. So as Dr. Aris was saying, the one sentence description in some sense for Testenium, so we're online, we're kind of cloud native, so hosted in the cloud. We're a kind of meta computing based, and we'll touch upon that concept in some detail, essentially being able to program and develop code from a human language perspective. And what are we trying to do? What are we trying to do with this platform? We're essentially enabling, an online test automation platform, and at the same time allowing, organizations, individuals, the capability to do database application development in a far more streamlined and refined way. So just going forward, so the overview is, we're really looking at bringing in tremendous cost and operational efficiencies in the QA automation space. And essentially, again, when we look at software development as an industry, across the board, as I think we all can agree without much doubt, it is fairly human activity intensive in the sense, software development tends to follow a linear cycle. The more complex and the larger the software piece is, the more people that you have involved. And again, that becomes a function of even on the testing side, because more complex and larger the software, your testing function itself assumes a greater degree of complexity. So that's really, the space that we're trying to address, Edmund. I'm just going to focus a bit on this particular slide here, and there's nothing extremely esoteric or exotic about what I'm saying here. These are pretty much trends that all of us have seen, and the irony is, thanks to what's happened in our world over the last speed at which organizations and enterprises are adopting them. Yeah, can you?
There's a network break, Gladwin. Your network's breaking a bit.
Okay. All right. Am I audible? Am I audible right now?
Now okay. Yeah.
Now you're okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I'm not sure at what point I broke off. But I was just
about just 1 minute or 2 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just looking at a few industry trends, and the state of play, if you will, right now from an industry and environment context. So clearly, organizations who were previously skeptical, a little worried about adopting, operational platforms on the cloud are doing so today. Increasingly, historically, there's been a trend of, do I build or buy software capability and applications? And increasingly, the trend of buying commercial off-the-shelf software, which essentially means that you're buying packaged software and you're trying to land it in your environment, and you need an independent way to validate, that software works. The other trend that we really see is, previously when a software vendor would tell you that it takes 9 months to 18 months to implement and deploy, a core application. Thanks to COVID and thanks to the changing dynamics in the industry, it's just ironically it has just become much faster in terms of implementation and deployment. Whether it's a factor of people working remote, it's a factor of the software sitting in the cloud. You don't have a data center element coming in. So the faster implementation of software. We are having a lot more componentized functionality built. Now, what I really mean by that is previously, as an organization, when you wanted to change your core application infrastructure, you tended to rip out and replace, and therefore it became, once in a CIO or a CTO's tenure in an organization kind of decision, because it was far more complex. But today the technology allows you to kind of build small, deploy small, and and continue your transformation in an incremental way. And what does that mean? That really means that every time you bring in a change, you need to test and ensure it works, and it works well, even with what you have, what you have in place previously. So the whole thing about, as you have continuous development, continuous integration and deployment, you similarly have continuous testing. And then, if you look at this in totality, so you have a situation of rapid digital adoption. You have the scenario of being able to integrate. Everyone's talking about ecosystems today, that, partnering and collaborating in industry spaces. So you have a situation wherein your system needs to talk to, third-party systems. And then you have, the whole scenario of customer experience and employee experience. Employee experience is interesting because previously you had hundreds, if not thousands, of employees co-located. In a COVID and possibly a post-COVID scenario, you will have distributed teams, and that's just the reality of the industry operations at this point in time. So you have a situation wherein your employee is just as remote as your customer, and that itself, you could possibly live with your customers not being in touch or not being 24/7 connected, but it becomes a little more difficult when your employees face similar challenges. So you have all these trends coming in. I'm just looking at that, that final bullet point there, building enterprise internal knowledge capital. That sounds fairly intricate, but what I really mean is, in your traditional sense, when an organization outsources, whether it's development, whether it's quality assurance, deployment, integration, etc., what in effect is really happening, knowledge which existed in the organization is kind of going outside the organization. Because the build or the subject matter expertise is kind of being nurtured and encouraged by a third party, on the side of a third party. Now, the Testenium paradigm is really about organizations taking control of that knowledge capital. That intellect that they are building, whether it's by improving their technology, by bringing in smarter, more inexpensive, more innovative features in their business models, remains in the organization, because they're able to have, far better hold and grip on their development, deployment, and, quality assurance. So I will close what I'm saying, with this particular slide. So we have kind of looked at industry trends. We have looked at the environment that we're operating in. So in a way, we have kind of looked at the context in which, Testenium is coming live into the world, so to speak. And in that kind of context, what are the value drivers, or what is the value proposition that Testenium brings forward? So firstly, and I think you will find, more emphasis on this as we, go into the demo. But the fact really is, on an infrastructure side, being able to run a software as a service platform, and therefore bringing in efficiencies of scale and that optimization, whether it's like at enterprise server level, your production servers, your UAT or your test servers, which are sitting more often than not in a data center, if not, with a cloud services provider. The kind of storage capacity you need to build internally to run test environments, the devices which your actual users have, and do they really need enterprise class kind of, computer, PC, and laptop equipment, and the actual software infrastructure, whether it's a kind of testing tools or components that you're invested in. Testenium brings about an optimization, a kind of rationalization across all these four components. In effect, by allowing users to, to have really stripped down, very light, software and hardware capability on their side to access, to access, the Testenium application. The second bit, again, I'm sure all of us are very familiar. Online test automation, I think, has been doing the rounds for the last decade or so. But increasingly, we're seeing, the scenario wherein that's not just, we're not just talking automation here, but we're talking, moving it remote into the cloud, We're talking about distributed teams, being able to work in parallel on the same platform, on defined, quantums of work. So Testenium is really about bringing, that online test automation at scale, with, all the associated benefits with test automation, whether it's moving towards a more error-free, a scalable kind of operational process. The third bullet is really about, autonomy in operations. I refer to building knowledge capital in the organization. The moment you outsource and you move, handing over control, to an outsourced entity, to an outsourcer. But we're talking about Testenium giving you that autonomy in being able to kind of build, define, and scale your operations, based at your stage of the business. We're talking about scalability of testing. Again, it's a cloud-based kind of application platform, so allows you to, to scale up or to scale down, literally on a turning the tap on off kind of mode. Again, based on the growth of your business, the growth of your IT portfolio. We're talking about flexibility of access. Essentially, being able to, again, this point about us making. Your customers were always distributed in a digital e-com world, but now your employees are likely to be distributed as well, and therefore flexibility in access of the platform. So to kind of summarize, the last 2 points were really about, bringing in software development efficiencies by, allowing you to kind of run with that autonomy and scale internally, that flexibility of access. We will talk to you about what we do on the searchable encryption bit, about, being able to create your own test automation code on the fly and kind of, upload it and create it in the platform, the kind of security that comes with. And all of this, in summary, is, just results and reflects in very significant commercial savings. For an enterprise, regardless of the size that you're at, you might be small and medium size, you might be, you might be actually running very small pieces of, quantified testing work, or you might be a very large organization who's looking like a platform enablement of Testenium. So essentially, across the board, the proposition is about, bringing in significant commercial savings. So, I am conscious I went on, a little longer than I expected, but I will pause here, Edmund and Betel. If you had any questions, more than happy to address that, or I will, request, Dr. Aris to kind of, bring up the demo.